So if you're a country like Nigeria, that is a net oil exporter, one, we're demanding less oil from you, but secondly, the amount of oil that we're demanding from you has dropped. So we are estimating that Nigeria could lose almost $19 billion of this if the trend continues. And that's a big shock to Nigeria's economy, which was already growing at quite a low rate of 2.8%. If you look at that, Nigeria, Angola, and Algeria are the three largest oil exporting countries on the continent, and so all of them will suffer this shock. When we talk like that, you get the impression that maybe those are the big ones will suffer, but the small ones will also suffer. The smaller oil exporting countries like Equatorial Guinea, where even though they are small countries, the share of oil exports in their overall GDP is very high. And so you will also have that effect, and my colleagues will talk a little bit more about that when we show you the slides. The other big demand shock is tourism. Of course, countries like Morocco, countries like Kenya, countries like South Africa, and others get a lot of their revenue from tourism. But as you know, flights have been reduced in Kenya, flights have been reduced in Ethiopia, flights have been reduced in the United States, flights have been reduced in many places. So even if the parks are still there and as beautiful as ever, nobody's coming. So there is no demand for our tourism assets. But again, when you look at many of Africa's citizens are in Europe, are in the United States, and work has stopped, many of those, and many of the Africans that are our migrants, most of them are doing full-time jobs, some of them are doing part-time jobs, we're sending remittances to the continent. Countries like Cape Verde are heavily dependent on remittances, Morocco is heavily dependent on, Ethiopia is heavily dependent on remittances. When jobs stop because there's a lockdown or because you're working from home, then the remittances drop as well, which means that there's less resources that are being sent into the continent. So that's the other demand shock that we see happening. So it's oil, tourism, remittances are the three big ones. The next one is, of course, the slowdown in investment. So all the construction that we see going on the continent is creating jobs is going to slow down because we can't get the goods in or we can't get them out in time to continue the construction that is happening. So that slowdown in investment has a double impact. One is resources are not coming in through direct investment, but also jobs are not being created, and even the ones that have been created may get destroyed because people cannot continue to hold employees with uncertainty of knowing when is it that markets will start again and deliveries will happen. So we get a problem of job losses that will also hit us. On the other side, is the demand issue. On what we call supply side, which is offering things and we can't get them. Africa imports a lot of its food, particularly wheat, sugar, oil, edible fats, and because again of the disruption in the supply chain, you will not be able to find it. Many of you have probably gone out to the markets to buy hand sanitizers, and you can find it. If you can find it, it's 500 times the price. So what you will start getting is food prices will start going up, and hence, so I've talked about job losses. But the second effect is that prices start going up and poverty increases because for the same amount of sugar you have to pay a lot more, for the same amount of oil you have to pay a lot more, and so we're going to start getting inflation. The second area that we'll be talking about is pharmaceuticals. Of course, this is a health crisis, so we're looking for drugs. Africa imports almost 96% of its drugs. 94% of its drugs. So we get 94% of our drugs from outside the continent. 94%. So first of all, there will be scarcity, and so those prices will go up. And secondly, they may not even get here because of the disruption in the supply chain. So we do have some issues on the pharmaceutical side as well, on the health side, and this is a health crisis. So we do need to see how we do that. Our countries have already started responding. In Ethiopia here, for example, I think 2 days ago, the Minister of Finance announced a 300 million increase in the healthcare budget to take care of the issue. Ghana has done the same, Senegal has done the same. They are all responding. We estimate that this will cost about a total of $10 billion more in healthcare expenditure just to begin to build the systems to address this issue as it comes. And of course, most of you who cover the economic news on the continent have already been covering news on the issues of debt sustainability on the continent and where we go with Africa's debt. With a drop in revenues because of lack of exports, a drop in exports, a higher imports that we're getting, lack of jobs, so we can tax income taxes. We're going to probably increase in debt. And that will lead us to an even more macroeconomic situation. So we find ourselves, I think, today, while we only have 50 cases out of 1,000, 18,000 cases, while we only have 15 countries out of 115 that have been affected in the world, economically, we are going to take a very, very big shock. Many countries, as you see in China, in the United States, have already passed fiscal stimulus bills. The United States, immediately 3 weeks ago, got in with an $8 billion stimulus bill, and now considering a second one. Australia has done the same. On the continent, we don't have the kinds of monetary policy instruments to inject fiscal stimulus in the economy, and in many of our countries, the monetary sector is not that deep to be able to reduce interest rates in a way that will make it more accessible. I think one of the issues that we may also face is capital flight, because with countries, if you have resources in Nigeria, for example, your currency is going to be threatened because of this huge economic shock. People will try to take their money out of the country very quickly, because otherwise then the value of those resources will drop. So we are facing a lot of different shocks, because essentially, even though we are only 2% of the global economy on trade, we are very dependent, as you see, on food, on health cost, on oil, on what is happening in the global economy. So while as a share of GDP we don't seem very linked, each of our economies is quite substantially linked with Europe and China, and very, very exposed on that side. So I think going forward, what the Economic Commission for Africa will be doing is begin to provide assistance to different countries on what kinds of policies one needs to put in place. One, to ensure that the poor don't get poorer. We've talked about the cost of drugs. We've talked about the cost of food. We've talked about the cost of fuel. Those who are net fuel importers will benefit, of course, because the price will drop, and so fuel will be cheaper. Ethiopia is in that category, so you will see a drop in fuel prices, but you may see an increase in food prices. And so we'll need to work to see how we balance those pressures to make sure that particularly the poor do not suffer an inordinate amount in that case. We think that because there is the CFTA coming, it provides for Africa an opportunity to, if Africa was trading more with itself, we would not suffer such huge supply shocks, which are leading to the inflationary pressures that we are seeing, and that hopefully some of these issues can help us realize that, rather than importing, over 60% of our wheat from outside the continent, we can actually start producing within the continent and provide jobs, and at the same time ensure that there is improved and better supply of food and pharmaceuticals, for example. So I will stop there and maybe have my colleagues give you a quick brief of the presentation. We will give you the presentation by the end of this session, and then take some questions from you. But thank you very much again for coming.
Yes, I think when the outbreak started, the focus rightly was on the people, the health effects. The reason why we're looking at the broader economic effects is that the capacity of the country to address these challenges is basically a function of its resources. The budget, the amount of money that countries have to absorb these shocks. So you look at the countries, the powerhouses in Africa, like Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, you find that their level of debt to GDP is quite high, and which means that their capacity to contain this onslaught is pretty much curtailed. With the debt to GDP ratio of 84%, a deficit of 8%, it tells you something about their capacity to contain this scourge. Now, if to the extent that their health systems are already compromised and they cannot contain this, it means that the impact on the rest of Africa's GDP, and also if you take Nigeria, given the population, the ability for this disease to spread quite high. So that's why it is important to look at the economic effect, because it's a function of existing health systems, the capacity of those health systems as they are now, and the ability to reinforce those health systems to prevent the spread. And so what I'm saying, the message here is that the current fiscal situation of most of these countries, particularly the big countries, is not big enough for them to even undertake the kinds of fiscal stimulus packages that would help them help mitigate the impact by providing social protection for those who are affected, but also to fight the disease as it is now. Because in countries that have not been affected currently, they are making health outlays, expenditures to anticipate this event. So it's important that we look at the fiscal dimension and understand its impact. For a country like Ethiopia, where the industry, the airline industry is a big source of funds, we anticipate that about 260 million will be lost as a result of this scourge, which will have big implications for its GDP. We talked about on the area of oil, crude oil exports. We find that on net, for the net oil exporters, they could lose in the regions of about 65 billion on net. Now, I mean, of course, for those who import oil, there's going to be a benefit, at least in the short run. But the biggest story here is how these supply chain is going to be disrupted, and how it's going to affect all aspects of the economies of Africa. Given our external dependence, that means that our exposure to these shocks is high. So that also effects. It means that we cannot produce as much as we would like to because we're imported inputs will either not be available or be higher in prices. And these price shocks will be transmitted to the local economy, and that will mean that is likely to rise. Currently, our social protection systems are not very strong. They're pretty much non-existent in a lot of countries. And so how do we support countries, how do we support governments to be able to mitigate these shocks? And the unemployment implications are going to be high as a result of this. So, in a nutshell, before I pass on to my colleague to talk about some of the treatment aspects, we estimate, based on assumptions about supply, the demand side and the supply side, that Africa could lose in the region of about $29 billion on net. On the demand side, really the drivers of this are really the impact on China in terms of the demand for our commodities, particularly oil. And also we have Europe, which is a big trading partner. So that impact is going to be quite big. On the supply side, it is going to be transmitted through the productivity shocks that we're going to experience. People getting sick, social distancing, all of these things are going to affect productivity at the local level, which means that we're also not going to be as high as it is. All of this is at a time when we're talking about the need to accelerate efforts to achieve SDGs, and therefore we need to be mindful of what are the kind of strategies that we need to put in place to either stem this the impact of this disease on our economies, but we also need to think about some of the opportunities that could arise out of this scourge. To what extent can we begin to manufacture some of the logistical inputs or items that help us to avoid the spread? Gloves and face masks, for example. Of course, these are longer-term issues, but in the short term, really the investment should be in terms of stemming the spread of this disease. But at this stage, I'm going to have Steve talk about in detail about some of the trade aspects of this disease.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Let's go to slide 6. Because what we have done here is to show the 25 top exports and imports of goods for the continent. And we have used 3-year averages. What I would want you to take away on this point is that on the part of the exports, the commodities that constitute our greatest share of our exports are the ones that are impacted most by what we see today, including the decline in the prices of oil. And then if you look at on the import side, we import a lot as a continent, a lot of manufactured goods, including our pharmaceuticals, and I'll give more details on this. And so the imported goods, the 25 top imports that are being affected by this coronavirus and the disruption in the supply chains are going to be of significance, first of all, to the needs of our population, and of course, in addition to the performance of our economies. Now, if you go to the next slide, where now we focus on fuels. Fuels constitute 7.4% of Africa's GDP. And so you can actually see, just by the reduction of the prices to $30 per barrel, is going to impact on a significant part of our GDP in terms of the African economy. Now, we have actually run some numbers and seen that the countries that depend a lot on oil. So that slide shows you the 10 countries that depend a lot on oil. So you have countries like Nigeria, Algeria, Angola, all the way to Ghana. We also show the share of fuels to their total exports, and also the share of fuels to their GDP. And our estimates show that they are going to get to lose at least $100 billion because of the reduction of the fuel prices from 57.6, where most of them did their budgets, to about $30 per barrel. So a small economy like Libya, 62% of its GDP is dependent on oil exports. Equatorial Guinea, 38.4% of its GDP is dependent on oil. So you can see the significance of this price reduction to the ability of these countries to be able to have sufficient resources to be able to deal with any economic and social impacts that emanate from the coronavirus. Now, so the number that we have here is that there is going to be a loss of at least of about $101 billion because of the reduction of the fuel prices in terms of the fuel exports from the continent. And this, if you look at the other commodities that I have listed, they are also going to be impacted in a significant way because of the decline in demand and the slowdown of the economies globally. Now, if we go to the case for Nigeria, and this is just to highlight for you. So we have the numbers there for Nigeria, whereby we estimate that Nigeria exports of crude oil in 2020 are going to decline by between $14 billion and $19 billion. So if you take it that those of you who know the price at which Nigeria had done its budget, which was it 57? They had done their budget at $57 per barrel, and now they are facing about $30 per barrel. You can see the significance of the budget hole that is going to emanate from this. And this is, of course, as you would imagine, is actually going to put pressure on the Naira, and with that, a lot of the other macroeconomic issues are going to be impacted. So let's go to the pharmaceuticals. So what we show here are the top 10 African exporters and importers of medicinal and pharmaceutical products. Now, the highlight number is that we import about $17 billion worth of pharmaceuticals. $16 billion of that come from the rest of the world, only $1 billion come from within the continent. Now, the Secretary said there is this $1 billion worth of pharmaceuticals that is traded within the continent, and half of that is actually traded within the continent. So there is a story here that there is an opportunity for Africa to increase or at least improve all these $1 billion of our pharmaceutical needs that come from within the continent, because most of that is actually traded within the continent. So you can go to the next slide. Mine is hanging, and I can't see from here. Okay, so we go now to the foods. If you go to the so we also provide you with data of the top 10 exported basic food items from the continent, and we also show you the top 10 imported basic food items by Africa. Now, most of those items that are imported by the continent, it's basically wheat, sugar, rice, edible oils. But the most significant number that I would want you to take away from here is the next slide, where we show you which are the countries that the top 5 countries that are importing these top 5 food items. So if you look at the case of wheat, you have Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Nigeria, and Tunisia. In the case of rice, you have and Ethiopia is number 9 on that. If you look at the case of rice, you have Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, South Africa, Ghana, and Senegal. And I think Ethiopia is also number. It's not there. It's actually under the edible fuels. And then in the case of sugar, you have North African countries, Nigeria, Sudan. In the case of vegetable fats, you have Egypt, Kenya, South Africa, Ethiopia, Tanzania. And edible products and preparations, you have Nigeria, Algeria, South Africa, Egypt, and Senegal. So countries that are already impacted in terms of some of the cases of the coronavirus, other in terms of the health side, others that are already impacted because they're going to see actually are also demanders of significant imports of the food that we have in the continent. So of course, we expect this is going to put a lot of strain in their budget, but it's also going to expose especially the low-income segment of the population. Now, so we have some policy options that we would want to highlight for the countries. So we noticed that the Chinese economy, which is a trade partner for Africa, is impacted significantly. European economies are also impacted significantly. So inevitably, we expect that Africa, before we got the cases that we are seeing here, it was completely impacted. So what was happening in China and in Europe. The export revenues, as we have indicated, are going to decrease, and we don't know whether the current forecast about $30 per barrel will actually fall further. We will see based on the evolution of what happens to the COVID-19. Now, with the of our country being important for basic food and similar concerns for the pharmaceutical, we expect that there's going to be this significant impact that you had from in terms of the availability because of the production, and also you would expect there will be issues on the side of security. Now, since I'm talking about trade, and we have the big story of the AFCFTA, on one side we do expect that the AFCFTA in the long run would be impacted not too much by the COVID-19. I mean, there's going to be a delay in terms of maybe the meetings for the negotiations that we are hoping would take place of the negotiating forums. But we do see an opportunity that the intra-African market and the AFCFTA going forward could actually help mitigate some of the challenges that we are seeing, because the AFCFTA would make it easier for us to trade among ourselves in terms of the agricultural products, and in this case, in terms of the food. It offers an opportunity for us probably to reduce the heavy dependence that we see in pharmaceuticals, because it will be possible now by the regulatory reforms and the reforms that countries are going to take for us to see more trade and production of pharmaceutical products within the continent. We are hoping that the countries that we have highlighted that are net food importers will take the opportunity, as we have probably now, to start doing advanced purchases if they can before the shut down in the logistics. So that is one of the things that we are advocating, and we are also advocating that the same should happen in the area of pharmaceuticals. So we hope with this slide to be able to have some numbers that tell the economic and potential social impacts of the COVID-19 as we started today, and we will continue with further analysis even as we look deeper into other economies besides the ones that we have mentioned during our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Vincent Dublanche from RFI. You stated that.
I think two things. The first is that one of the things that we are seeing is there has been a great response from the international community. The development partners, the African Development Bank, the World Bank, the IMF, have already announced substantial support to the countries. And WHO is already doing a lot of work. The United Nations Family is doing a lot as well. But in the very short run, I think countries will have themselves to produce and provide some immediate stimulus. That's what countries like Ethiopia have done. That's what Ghana is doing already. That's what Senegal is doing. Egypt is thinking about some of that. And so what may end up happening is that there is some flexibility in the sort of stated deficit amounts, which means that countries can spend just a little bit more while they redirect expenditures. That's another thing. Normally when this happens is you then look at, because by definition, and one of the things we said was that there will be a drop in sort of investment projects. So you can slow down on your investment projects and, you know, provide some more stimulus for your social spending and make sure that particularly the most vulnerable are not affected. So that's the first sort of source of resources will be national, while we try to crowd in the resources that are coming from development agencies.
Coletta. My name is Coletta Onjori I'm here for the SABC. If we look at the issue of COVID-19, there's a lot of uncertainty. No one really understands at the moment what COVID-19 is, so we can't even predict what it is, how we shall cure it, how we shall end it. So with that kind of uncertainty, so we have a situation, especially for small-scale entrepreneurs, who make the majority in our continent. What can we tell them now? Because some of them are losing a lot or have already lost a lot, especially those who depend on China, because China opened up the channels for so many people. But now there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of solutions we're hearing are being given at national level. No one is talking about, the small-scale entrepreneur. I don't know if there's something that, you've been looking at this issue at that kind of level. Thank you.
Well, I think, again, for the continent, some of these supply chain disruptions, as we call them, are just beginning to become more and more evident. And one of the things that we're looking at is, first of all, most of them owe money to the banking sector, whether there could be some rescheduling of their small and medium enterprise loans, so that as opposed to them sort of paying it next month when they haven't had any real activity, you can do that. I think one or two countries have actually, in the developed countries, have actually advanced payment for small and medium enterprise loans directly from the state into the banking sector, because you don't also want the banking sector to collapse. So the state can put in place some measures that help them not pay their loans. But that's the problem. If there is no demand, it's difficult to sort of re-stimulate it. What you can do is make sure that they don't go into bankruptcy. And this is, again, another opportunity, because in many of our countries, we don't really have good bankruptcy laws. And so it makes it very difficult for you to fold out when it's not your fault, and you cannot take insurance on that. And I think when we work on doing business environment in many countries, we're insisting and supporting the fact that countries put in place these kinds of laws, because that's the way then that you can actually provide stimulus and reschedule the loan through the banking sector or through non-financial banking institutions. Because on the continent, many people take loans not from the banking sector, but from non-bank financial institutions, small credit unions, and those kinds of institutions. And we would like now, in this time, to find some way of making sure that those institutions don't go bankrupt, while making sure that the small and medium enterprise business people don't also go bankrupt because they can't make up their loans. So that's, I think, one way of doing it. In some countries, what has happened is, as you do the safety nets, you still need to supply food. In Africa, with schools are still open. So a case, for example, in some of the developing countries, is that the state has stepped in and is providing, is demanding some of the resources that are being provided by the small and medium enterprises. So it's buying milk, it's buying sugar from them, and redistributing. So there's a new sort of economy that has come up. We don't have that kind of logistic supply chain yet on the continent to ensure that maybe in Kenya, South Africa, and a few other places you have that, but not in other countries. So the next best option is to provide some kind of social protection stimulus for those small businesses. And we have seen these cases before during Ebola, right? So we have some sense of how we manage these kinds of economic shutdowns when they happen.
Manazar from Al Ain. I have two questions. So did you have a dialogue with Ethiopian officials? And if you have a policy recommendation, please explain it. What percentage did the economy destruction will be in the continent? Did you place it in numbers?
One more.
All right, thank you. I'm Andu Alam from New Business Ethiopia. My question is to Stefan about the last recommendation. It seems that you are suggesting that this coronavirus for Africa could be an opportunity to look inward and think the solution comes from their own capacity, or to look into increasing productivity of food by producing more, probably, to mitigate the impact of problem with import. And the pharmaceutical sector, but I don't get how possibly we can increase the 1% share, the 6% share of the pharmaceutical currently produced in Africa, and increase. We still need those equipments from abroad, or some of the chemicals to produce those medicines. So how could you explain more on that one? Thank you.
No, thank you very much for your question on Ethiopia. I think one of the reasons why we're doing this is that we hope that beginning next week, we will actually start doing conversations with different ministers of finance to begin to discuss what is it that is possible. Of course, because this is happening so quickly, the first thing is to look at what is existing as policy. With Ethiopia, for example, we're doing a lot of work on domestic resource mobilization, which is trying to find new ways of revenue resources that can help to buttress the government's balance sheet. So with that and with new resources, that's the first thing is, how can you then spend this on social spending? And then, of course, the second one, as Stephen suggested, is looking at your imports of food and saying, you're going to get a windfall because Ethiopia is a net oil importer. So the cost of oil for you is going to drop, but the price of some of your basic foods are going to go up. How do we make sure that the balance is equally distributed so that particularly, again, the poor do not suffer the most? And look at issues of advanced purchasing. Can we then, not wait because we don't know what's going to happen in the long run? Make sure that we've purchased the oils and the edible foods that Ethiopia depends on from the outside in advance. Because if we remember during the food crisis in 2008, prices went up by almost 300-400%, and that then has the impact of causing even more poverty and more social disruption. So those are some of the things that we are looking at. Of course, on the health expenditure side, as a UN family, WHO and other UN agencies are working with the government to look at systems. Normally when these kinds of problems happen, there is a tendency to go in directly and just fix that little problem. But I think Ethiopia already has a very good health systems, the whole of sector strategy. And so where can we come in and help? And WHO is doing a lot of work with them on sort of setting in place those systems and building more of it.
Yeah, so yes, precisely the recommendation, you got it right. We see the AFCFTA offering an opportunity, even if there was no COVID-19, the AFCFTA is offering an opportunity for us to scale up the production and the trade of pharmaceuticals and food within the continent. We want Africa to remain open for business to the rest of the world, but we also want to take advantage of the huge consumer demand that one market provides. Just to give you an example of the numbers that I gave in terms of the African exports of medicinal and pharmaceutical products, even though these ones are limited, 56% of that go from within the continent. So by looking at these numbers, we see that there is a story going forward that countries can write on and ask themselves. Now we have established the African Medical Medicines Association. We have the AMA, that is an African Union initiative for medicines. We have the Center for Disease Control. Is there something that we can do beyond COVID-19? Because we will continue seeing things like this, as we have seen with SARS, MERS, and Ebola. So is there some light that COVID-19, by concentrating our mind, is showing us that we need to do? Now, what is the ECA doing on this? A lot of you have followed the last two business forums. We have noticed that we have had a lot of focus on the health sector. And one of the things that we presented in our business forum this year is the possibilities of taking advantage of the African continent of free trade area to do food procurements, because as we have had, because of the supply shocks and our source markets for pharmaceuticals, they are also affected. We expect that there are going to be price spikes. Now, those price spikes are going to hit the small economy very hard, because even without COVID-19, when it comes to the procurement of pharmaceutical products. So we see that ECA of having procurement of medicine and medical supplies. And we also see the AFCFTA giving opportunity for the scaling up of the local production of pharmaceuticals. So that recommendation is basically to spotlight on what we know given the COVID-19 and the needs that we have now, and also the possibilities that we can get by working together as a continent, of course, remaining open to the rest of the world.
Answer your question on the sort of global impact. So we are estimating, as of now, and it may get worse, Africa is growing at 3.2%. That was the projection for 2020. Thinking that if we continue with this trend of the COVID-19 and the shutdown in markets, Africa will only grow at 1.8%. So a huge drop in Africa's growth because of that. And for the last 3 years, we've been growing on average at about 3%. So from 3% to 1.8 to slightly below 2 is a quite big number for the continent. We're supposed to be going to 10%, not going back up.
All right, I think that's all. That's it. If there are no other questions, please feel free to follow up with us afterwards. We'll send you a copy of the presentation so that you can have the numbers directly. Thank you very much for your attendance and for your time.
great start. The conversation continues. Thank you very much.